This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org. Welcome to another edition of Maui Causes. Hi, I'm Sam Small. Todd Swan, thankfully, in the control room, pushing all the buttons to bring these words and images to your home, hopefully making an impact on our community because we have the opportunity to do so through a kaku and the internet. Maui Causes has a presence on both. We've got a weekly show here on Akaku. The shows also are posted on our website and on Facebook, mauicauses.org. Our intention is to be a positive disruption. That is a necessary element in a free society. And no more is that needed than here in Hawaii. Because this is not a free society. People think that Hawaii is just like the other American states, and it's not. People on the mainland are just beginning to wake up to the fact that corporations have taken control of virtually every aspect of our society. From the government, all the sectors, the courts, the governmental process, the regulatory process. That's how you end up with Monsanto writing the rules for the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Ag, and the FDA. All of those agencies had their regulations rewritten in the Reagan days when they deregulated all of these industries. Who did they bring in to rewrite the rules? They brought in the president of Monsanto to rewrite the rules for those three agencies. And in the doing so, they created loopholes in the system, and they've been operating their business in those loopholes. And it's that kind of process that has been insidious. It's been growing on the mainland. But here in Hawaii, that kind of system has been in place for over 125 years. It's how and why this society was taken away from the Hawaiian culture itself and given over to business interests. And it hasn't changed since. And it won't change until you participate. It won't change until you vote. It's really that simple. And because of the media access that we have, thank you to Akaku and the other forces at play, we have an opportunity to create change where no opportunity existed before. We can mobilize our community in numbers sufficiently to take back control, first of Maui County and then perhaps Hawaii itself. It's an uphill battle because there's a lot of money involved, more money than you think. And a lot of folks don't even realize that they are benefiting from that system. You know, there's a whole mid-level of society that gets their funding through the various different manipulations. Land development is a huge aspect of how these forces are at play here in Maui County. And so if you are in the construction trades, if you are in real estate, if you are doing anything that's related to these industries, and it is an industry, then some of your income comes through that manipulation, comes through that exploitation. You may not see it on a day-to-day basis. You may not realize it, but you're attached to it in a lot of ways. And it's in conflict at this point with your children's future. The reality of your children's future, if you live here, is very different because of the size, the small size. We're at that tipping point. We're at a place where Maui will become Oahu. There's a notion of build out, how much build out to have. Maui is estimating, the mayor estimated, I think, 12% that Maui is built out, only 12%. And there's an intention to build it out 100%. It should be fully exploited. And you need to consider what life here will look like if that is allowed to happen. And I say allowed because it will happen unless you put a stop to it. And the only way to put a stop to it is for you to participate in the vote and identify and vote for candidates who acknowledge that there's a problem here and are willing to fix it. Because nobody has been strong enough and had enough will to be able to fix it. If we get enough people with a conscience on our county council and in the mayor's office, we can turn this around. It really does, require an analysis and perhaps a restructuring of our entire way of doing business. But there's nothing wrong with that because we're at a point of transition. Maui is no longer going to be able to continue on as a good old boy, closely held club of people who are in power. We need this county to mature into a modern metropolis with appropriate transparency and stop all the shenanigans, the secret giveaways that the administration gives to developers. Again, back to land development as a big issue. That's where a lot of the money is. That's where a lot of the corruption is. And there are other systemic changes that need to be made here to be able to empower you and your children so that you have a proper future here in Hawaii and on Maui. And so we bring on the show candidates who are running for offices who do have a commitment to investigating and looking into appropriate ways to bring Hawaii and Maui County into the modern world, where we have control as people rather than corporations and moneyed interest having all the control. And so on the ballot this November, running for the 13th District State House Rep on the Green Party is Nikhilananda. And Nick, you've had your own show here on Akaku for many years. I know you've been deeply engaged and are very educated on a lot of the issues that are important yet not so well known. And I'd love to get into some of that with you today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Sam. I want to say your opening segment was so powerful. I was sitting here in awe.
Oh, thank you.
I want to thank you. You brought up so many issues that we could spend 10 hours talking about them. So, and I have to say that I don't think there was one issue you said that was not something that I wish I had said myself. You were speaking my mind, so thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. And you, as I said, you've had your own show here on Akaku for years, and I know that you've been, talking about this stuff for a long time. I remember, I was a cameraman on one of your shows and offering support, and you were going on about charter revision, and I'm going, what the hell is charter revision? I was clueless. And that was several years ago, and I've since been educated, and I appreciate the work that you did because you were a precursor to everything that I'm doing here today. You've been sounding the alarm and calling attention to these issues for decades. And I appreciate your candidacy because it is an opportunity to once again address these issues, hopefully in a way that people listen, because they don't usually listen. People have a tendency to tune out. So we'll try and keep it, to a place where people can follow along, not to get too technical on stuff. But there's a lot of things to talk about, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Right. And I want to thank you because not only were you a cameraman, but Maui Talks TV was on for 9 years, the longest running talk show on Akaku, and it was 90 minutes long, and it was just myself and the telephone. So it was you, the viewers, that were the stars of the show. That was one of my taglines. And you were the last director.
Yeah.
You did the last 2 shows, so I really thank you before we took a hiatus that's now lasted a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But
and doing it, we've talked about, turning Maui Causes into doing a live show, and it's a challenge doing a live show.
Right.
It brings a whole level of other requirements to the table that there's just no. We take comfort in producing this show because we record it to tape, and then I get a chance to edit it and clean out. And if I've gone over the top in describing stuff that really gets me, then I can dial it back and edit out a couple of my more inflammatory comments.
Right. When you're live, you never know who's going to call up. And I was proud that in 9 years, only 2 people did we stop taking their calls. I won't go into the stories as to why. Otherwise, whatever people wanted to talk about. And my education is a result of what other people share.
Sure.
So there's things that I haven't even thought of thinking about. And I think that what my candidacy, when you mention that, is that these many years where I have stood for office as a Green, I'm able to bring out issues that people don't talk about a lot. And one of the things I just want to show as an example, no one thinks about it today, but in 1992, first time I stood for office, we talked about, as the Green Party, sustainability. Mm-hmm. Today, it sounds trite.
Right.
When we brought it up in 1992,
it was a new thing.
It was a new concept.
All of the dialogue is important because even if we don't, even if we're not able to affect all of the change that needs to happen all at once, and it would be a shock on the system, to suddenly completely disrupt the entire system. No, it probably does need to be changed, piece by piece. But there's some very, very fundamental issues that are allowing this system to persist this way without people having the opportunity to drive change. Here in Maui, we benefit through an empowerment that we're able to have the citizens put forth an initiative. That's what we did in 2014 with the Shaka movement and Vote Yes Maui. There was a citizens initiative that brought forth this question to Monsanto. Is based on everything that we know and all the loopholes that I spoke about. It's really reasonable to assume that we are at some risk here in Hawaii by virtue of their open field multi-chemical testing that happens in our ecosystem, which we know is documented that has not been tested. There are no safety tests for what they're actually doing in the fields. We know that. And we as a community, through a citizens initiative, were able to get enough petitions on the ballot to be able to bring that to the public and try and make that change. Overruled in the courts, of course. But we performed a miracle here on Maui, and this community rose up. I will always be proud of this community for rising up against Monsanto and Dow and the agrochemical cartel to be able to assert our rights, that we want to know that this stuff is safe or not. It's a simple question. That process is unique to Maui and to the outer islands. Hawaii, on the state level, doesn't have a citizens initiative, and I know that's one of the things that is on your list.
Right. Well, I'm glad you actually mentioned that too, because I have to say it's rare that I'm wrong. But when people were talking about
you're such a humble man, yes.
In the fall of 2013, when people talked about getting an initiative on the ballot here in the county, I said, I'm on record to say, you'll never get enough signatures, and even if you did get enough signatures, you'd never get it through the vote. And I was totally wrong.
You were wrong.
Those are the only 2 times in my life I was ever wrong.
Well, it's a proud miracle
and
that
I totally agree with you. It was incredible that we got it. Now, when we mentioned the Charter Commission, I used to go in 2001, 2011. I went to the Charter Commission and I requested that they lower the threshold, because if you're knowledgeable about what it takes to get an initiative on the ballot, you're limited in the time. There's a certain percentage of people you have to get to sign it and all of that. So it's something that I would invite people to look at, that we still could lower the threshold to make it easier. This was the first time that we got it on. Now, you mentioned the state, because currently I am seeking a state office, the 13th District State Representative. And the state, Hawaii, is one of the few, if not the only Western state that does not allow a citizens initiative.
Right.
And you know there are so many issues that the legislature, because of their controlled by multinational corporations and the lobbyists and the money that they get in. My opponent, for example, has raised $100,000, 87% not on Maui or Maui County. So when you're fighting that, the citizens would like to get things on the ballot.
Right.
And I understand people say, well, then you'll have these outside forces pouring in all this money. And we proved in 2014, I think we were outspent 10-1, 7-1. I should have this figure, but we were so outspent. But the truth came through, where people saw, you know what? Okay, you're spraying. I don't really mind the spraying, but what are you spraying? Well, we're not telling you what you're spraying. You're not telling us what you're spraying? I want to know what you're spraying. And then what is the level of safety? And then the wind is blowing down onto communities where people are being affected, either asthma or young people. What is the level that you as a mother or a father or as a parent want to allow your child to be exposed to? So anyway, this is an example of the kind of thing, again, yeah.
And the look at the money, the process and the money here in Maui County. Thank you for speaking to making it easier for the community to achieve what we achieved, because as a community we raised and spent about $86,000 total. Monsanto and Dow spent over $12 million. The most ever spent on a local initiative in the history of the United States. It was historic. And it should tell the people something. It should tell you, you don't have to spend that kind of money unless you're lying. It's really simple. If you're telling the truth, you don't have to spend $12 million to get your point across.
And this is what's happening in our legislature, because again, campaign finance reform and the requirement that people let the community know where they're raising the money, and you see what lobbyists, the money they spend. I grew up in, well, I actually never grew up, but I lived in the Washington, D.C. suburbs when I was younger, and so I was in the heart of the monster. And people talk about K Street. Well, I worked down at K Street, not as a lobbyist. I was a teacher at a small college just around the corner from the White House. Anyway, the money that is spent, the millions and millions and millions and tens of millions, and our system, our ethics, where we allow an elected official to then, within a short amount of time, become a lobbyist,
right,
get a huge salary.
Sure.
And why are they paid so much money? Because of the impact they have. And so again, one of the issues in the state this year is to get the legislature, and it has to go through the constitutional amendment, but anyway, get the legislature to allow citizens of the state of Hawaii in the neighbor islands and Oahu, because we're very Oahu-centric, being able to vote on issues that the legislature won't bring up.
Right, so a citizen's petition, a citizen's initiative would go around the councils and around the state control and would force an issue to be placed on the ballot. Like California, people, you hear about proposition this, proposition that.
All the Western states have proposition. Washington State, and I don't want to misspeak, but I believe that most of the states, in fact, I think every state that legalized cannabis was through citizens' initiative. Hawaii was the only one, as far as, I misspoke just there, medicinal marijuana, the medicinal use of cannabis, Hawaii's legislature was the only one that voted. Everyone else was initiatives.
And it's interesting.
And then as far as the recreational use,
Right.
that I don't have the statistics in front of me, how many were initiatives and how many were state legislatures. But California's example passed it by an initiative.
Right.
The majority of people, they lost the first time, went back to the community a few years later, and it passed.
And it's, it's interesting because the pattern of abuse that I see politically here in Hawaii consistently is that on a few core issues, the politicians do the right thing, and they move some issues forward in the right way. But when it really comes down to where the money is, they consistently side with the corporate interests.
Right. Too often that's a fact, and there are exceptions, and there's things that I just was listening to the radio on the way over here, and there's a talk about how millennials, and we were all young at one time, it's hard to imagine, but we don't have the time to wait 30, 40, 50 years for something to get through.
Right.
We could talk about prison reform, we could talk about all kinds of things. But for example, with the medicinal marijuana and cannabis, millions of people have gone to jail for a small amount of possessing. That's something now, a sixth of the entire country, it's legal. So eventually something that people have gone to jail for, homosexuality was illegal. Where are all the issues that we could talk about, things that were illegal, that then the progressive movement, and I think humanity moves in a progressive way, and then all of a sudden sometimes we have these walls like we do in the federal government right now, where there's a wall where we seem like we're going backwards. But again, initiative allows the people, because we are a government of the people, to make those decisions.
And this kind of thing will be even more important if the Supreme Court is swung towards a conservative bent, because our civil liberties and the rights that we've fought, that so many people have fought so hard to establish, are going to be taken away from us on that federal Supreme Court level. All the more reason to be able to have the freedom of the citizens to be able to assert ourselves on the local level, because otherwise the domination is going to be supreme. I mean, it's the domination and exploitation of business interests over this society here in Hawaii is only going to get worse. We see it locally in the attitudes expressed even in the mayor, who's running for county council, but yet it had the How can a sitting mayor say something like, the entire Hawaiian religion is made up?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I bring in my spiritual background and experiences, I always attempt to not speak as a negative. And you're speaking about someone who for 12 years was the mayor and swore, of course there's a joke, that's why I always call myself a community activist and not a politician. Mm-hmm. How can you tell a politician is lying? Their mouth is moving. So he swore soon after he was elected to his third term, second in a row, that he would never run for office again. Then within a couple of years, he's going to run for lieutenant governor, realized that he would have no chance. Now he's running for to get back on the council. And we're reworking. There's 3 ex-council members now running for to get back on the council.
Right.
Not for re-election, but they were on the council in the past.
They're recycling old ideas, right. And this is one of the fundamental problems with what's going on, because the money interests like Monsanto and the other corporations are pushing these people. Correct. And saying, hey, wait a minute, we're losing control. There's a chance that we could lose control over this society, and we need you to go back to work. Yeah. And so that you can protect us. And if you're voting for those candidates that have recycled themselves and are coming back to try and take control of our county council again, then you are doing tremendous damage to this society. If you vote for people, you will drive us back 20, 30 years to where the level of corruption was huge, massive, even more than it was today. We need the fresh blood. We need the candidates that are younger and have a completely different understanding and a completely different commitment. Candidates like Kiani Rollins Fernandez, who went off to college, got multiple degrees, got a legal degree, so that she could come home to Molokai and run for county council to represent the people of Molokai. As a young woman, she went off on a mission, and she is ready to serve this community. Those are the kind of candidates that are running for our county council, and we beg you to consider supporting them. We're going to talk more with Nikhilananda in just a moment. We'll be right back.
There's more to our show in just a moment. This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org.
Welcome back to Maui Causes. I'm Sam Small. With me is Nikhilananda, who is running for the State House Rep District 13, which covers?
It covers Kaho'olawe, Molokini, Lanai, Molokai, and the North Shore East Maui, from Paia to Haiku to Huelo to Keanai, Nihiku, Hana, Kipahulu, Kaupo. It's the largest district in the state, not necessarily physically, because I think there's a district on the Big Island that's even physically bigger, but it covers 5 islands, 3 inhabited islands, 3 of the most remote communities in the state.
Right.
It is unacceptable that we have one district that covers these 3 remote areas. And so that's something that I want to look at.
They all get marginalized
All of them.
together.
And then you put them all together in one district.
Right.
And of course, the census is coming up in 2 years. We'll have reapportionment. One thing that Hawaii does have is a progressive system, is that we have a reapportionment commission. Mm-hmm. We don't do it the way you see states, and the Supreme Court just sidestepped these discussions on gerrymandering. So you have a commission that's supposed to be nonpartisan that decides where to place things. But if you see some communities get divided, Kihei is divided in the council, for example. Huelo, where I live, is part of an East Maui council district, but part of the Paia Haiku Community Plan. So I would like to see, without discussing it here necessarily how we would do it, to have Hana and East Maui and Molokai Lanai, if possible, to be situated in different legislative districts. But it would take a lot to look at. But they're going to look at it in 2020, and so I want to be part of that also.
Right. That's a coming process.
Now, something you mentioned about just before we went on the break, Kiani, even our council, to have someone, I went to a forum the other day and I listened to the candidates from Molokai talk about Molokai. And that's actually part of my legislative district. Then we had the people from Lahaina talk about what's going on in Lahaina. And for me personally, I haven't been to Lahaina for almost 3 years. I live on the North Shore of and East Maui. And so I've been pushing for years.
With the traffic on the Poly, it can take you 3 years to get there.
Well, yeah, no, I left my house a long time ago. I still haven't gotten there.
There you go.
So I've been an advocate, speaking about things that I've been advocating for, and you see more and more people now support it. District voting.
Yes.
And if we divided our council, because there's nothing sacrosanct, Kauai has 7 council members, Big Island, Maui, and Oahu have 9. If we had 11 council districts, Molokai connected with another area would have 50% of a district, and because the fear is that you wouldn't have someone from Hana, Molokai, and Lanai on the council. It could be, but why should someone like me living on the North Shore vote for who Molokai represents? And we could talk for a long time about how many council members lose their community vote, but they win because we have at large. So to me, it is an undemocratic system. We need to look at on the council. It's not part of my purview here as a state rep, but it is part of my purview as a citizen of Maui County, that we redo our council races to where the people in an area actually vote for their representative, and they don't have people from Hana voting for the person from Lahaina, the person from Kihei voting for the person from Molokai.
Well, Nick, I got to tell you, one of the things that I appreciate about you is that I always learn something from you, because just the idea, it always seemed we have 9 council members. We don't have to have 9 council members.
There's nothing anywhere that says, right. The charter says 9 now, but we could have 11.
But we could have 11. We've talked in the past, redistricting, Maui County has been an issue around for a while, and there are a number of different schemes,
right.
and it's all, 3 clusters of 3 or independent, and it's all been based on 9.
Right.
And 9 is not sacrosanct.
Right.
There are other ways to look at this situation,
right.
And it doesn't have to be 9. So I love that idea. That opens up the whole thing for an even broader discussion and a perhaps even better solution. So thank you.
Right, and that's part of what I mentioned before, and I'll say it again, is that the benefit of having the Green Party involved, there's nothing in the Constitution that says we are a 2-party country. Right. And so to have, like in Hawaii, we actually have 5 political parties, but the state legislature, we are the most centralized state in the nation. Number 1, we have 71 out of 76 legislators are from one party. And so to have people from the other party, so the things that the Green Party brings out and what I bring out were based on 4 pillars of grassroots democracy, nonviolence, social justice, and ecological wisdom. What we bring out is these issues, just like you said, thinking, tritely people say, oh, I'm thinking out of the box, but giving a different perspective, and like I said, talking about sustainability or some issues that people didn't talk about before, just to open up to the discussion. And I do pride myself on having education, having the critical thinking to look at these issues, and I'm not saying I'm always right. That's why I mentioned about the initiative back in 2014. I was wrong about it. I supported it, just didn't think it would pass.
Right.
And I worked my little hiney off to get it to pass, and I'm glad.
So did many people.
Right,
Yep.
I'm glad to.
That's why
right,
it passed.
Exactly. It was a grassroots, which is another thing. It was a grassroots, and I talk about the Green Party being grassroots democracy, local control. And we see that in the federal system that we have, that sometimes the federal government comes in and they push things that are not healthy for us. Sometimes they push things that are. For example, racial discrimination. It was the federal government that moved into the South and demanded that we recognize people of all races as human beings. So.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. There is no.
And that's the system we have. Because in other countries, they have one system. The capital decides for everywhere. Whatever, and I don't want to give different countries examples, because every system is done a little differently.
Well, at the top level, in Hawaii State is our Hawaii State Constitution. And one of the things that's at play and being discussed is a constitutional convention that would actually come together and perhaps suggest changes to be made to the Hawaii State Constitution. The timing of that scares the hell out of me right now.
Right, well, our last constitutional convention, they call it CON-CON, was 1978. And the fear that people have, including me, and here's an issue that I swing a little back and forth, is the fact that there's outside, and you talked about it, there's so much money interest and outside corporations, and we can see how Hawaii, the largest corporation on Maui, in Maui County, is not a Maui corporation. They used to be a Maui corporation, but they're now a for-profit land use development company. They're not a little growing some flowers out in the fields.
And not locally owned or controlled.
Right.
And there's this historic feeling, there's this nostalgia that people have for that, for that company, for A&B and for HC&S. People still talk about, how and I think even, one of the senators, Ross Baker, manufactured this notion that the people on the West Side would welcome cane burning again.
Well, that was the thing, as you see, mentioning that, and I'm glad you mentioned cane burning. When they went out of business in the December of 2016, HC&S, they went out of business, as we talked about, because it is a capitalist for-profit corporation. They were not making money. Right. But the local daily paper and the special interest kept on saying, it's you outsiders that push because you didn't want cane burning.
Had nothing to do with
and
it.
it had absolutely, when we
Nothing
talk about
to do
fake
with it.
news,
Yep.
there's an example. Then they said, oh, 600 and some odd people are out of work. What's going to happen? And the figures are that 90% of them have found other jobs because we have a really good economy.
Very
the downside
little
of the
impact.
economy, which I have to say, is that there are minimum wage jobs, and that's why affordable housing is an issue that we'll talk about. And of course, you mentioned the con, and I want to go back to that for a second, because there are issues that need to be changed. The way that we local control, we have no cities in the state except for Honolulu. And nowadays, people that have lived on the mainland know that you sometimes have a city with 5,000 people in it, 3,000 people in it. So the areas of imagine, just think for a second, if you close your eyes and think about Kihei, Kahului Wailuku, Lahaina being more independent, having a different metropolitan structure. And that's a constitutional change that the legislature does not want to deal with. Now, the beauty of our constitution in 1978 was the public trust doctrine.
Yes.
The respect for the indigenous culture. These things were radical in that time.
Right.
And so I understand people's fear of having a constitutional convention, and it would be really important who serves on it,
right,
what issues come up. And then, of course, it goes back to the community to decide whether they want to accept it or not. So there's a lot of layers, and I totally understand people that are fearful of it, because I'm fearful of it too. Somehow I sort of tend to say, well, you know what, maybe it's time after 40 years to look at these things, but I might regret it. I understand that. So this is an issue that, to me, it's not black and white, or I like to say green and white. And it's something that will be talked about, because we're also going to have a census in 2 years, in 2020. We're going to count the people who lives where on the island. And I just want to go back just really quickly,
yes,
and we'll
please
talk about it
Go
when
ahead.
you talked about the development on Maui.
Yes, please.
People talk about you don't want to Californicate Oregon, and people talk about Kihei. What was it? It's like, and there was a phrase, and I'm just forgetting it now, about Kihei turning into Oahu or Honolulu. And we now have a metropolitan area on Maui County, because Wailuku, Kahului, Paia together has over 50,000 residents, and the federal government recognizes this as a metropolitan area.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so there's now a new federal structure of looking toward overdevelopment and all that, and the issue that has come up the most because of that is the Paia bypass, or the relief route, and I don't think we'll have time to talk about that today, but there's all these issues, again, that sort of emanate from the kind of structure that we have, and who is in elected office, and who is in the administration, and who we have serving at the top of, we talk about food sovereignty and food independence, and food security. And our Department of Agriculture in the state gets 1% of the budget, and we can't operate with that.
Well, and that's even a misnomer, because the Department of Ag is being directed with a specific intention, it seems, to not fully staff. So the budget that they do have, though it's probably lower than what it should be for true food security here in Hawaii, to establish food security and food sovereignty, the Department of Ag is not being run in any way, shape, or form to facilitate food security. The Department of Ag is being run in every means possible to support big ag's commercial interest and exploitation at every step of the game. And they don't even bother filling the inspector positions that they have the funding for, because they don't want to do anything that will confront Monsanto and Dow.
Right.
And if they were to have more inspectors, it's Monsanto and Dow that would be getting in trouble.
Sure, and we also, one of the talks, you can see how it's all intertwined. A lot of us were against expanding the Kahului runway years ago. As a result, the state pulled the airport bypass road. And so it took 10 or 12 years, and we watched Dairy Road get bumper-to-bumper traffic and all crowded. So it all interrelates. And when you talk about the inspectors, for example, the fear that we had was not that you have a longer runway. Who's against having a longer runway? It was that we're not supporting the inspectors to look at invasive species. And a friend of mine just came to visit recently and said, gee, how come I get checked when I'm flying over to California? They make me put my bags through, but when I'm flying to Hawaii, it seems like you're on the honor system. And we have, whether it's Koki's from or
there's a receptacle at the escalator at the airport that, oh yeah, if you have an apple or a banana that you're bringing in, please put it here.
Right.
It is voluntary.
So all
it's
of
crazy.
these things, and we can go on the different, the Public Utility Commission or the Land Use Commission or the Department of Education, all these state agencies. One of the things that comes up the most as a candidate, people talk about education constantly, and the local council has little to no impact on education because it's a state-run. We're the only state that has a state-run system, which is another thing I've talked about for years as a teacher, and to break that up into.
And the persistent call to audit the state education system.
That's one of my campaign.
It's so top-heavy as to administration that none of the dollars that are actually going into the system end up in the classroom.
Right. We have too many bureaucrats that are what I call non-classroom personnel, and I just actually had to respond to a questionnaire recently about that very issue. So we can again talk about that. And I've worked as a substitute teacher. I worked as a teacher at Job Corps. I worked at a college. So I've seen education from different levels. So that's another area where
those are important experiences. I mean, being in the classroom, substitute, okay, but still you're there, you're in that environment. I haven't benefited from being actually in the classroom with kids and dealing with that.
I just spent 6 months almost every day at King Kekalike. So you might say, well, substitute teacher, well, some people will say, if you step back and look, that it's more of a challenge to be a substitute than it is to be, and I never answer to sub, because a sub is a sandwich or a boat that goes underneath the water. I'm a substitute teacher. I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree, I have certificates, I have a real estate license, I have all these educational, academic mediation. I was a small claims court mediator for 2 years for this district court here in Maui. So all of these experiences add to that, and I'm always shocked that the opponent, the current incumbent, has a high school diploma and is pushing for not only the employment, you keep on mentioning Monsanto, and they are a farmer connected with Monsanto, but also, for example, wanting to make culturally cockfighting a culturally protected activity. And me, I want to strengthen our animal cruelty laws. So there's a lot of that are just blatant differences, and people have a choice to in when you go and, like you were talking about earlier about local races, people need to look at the individuals and understand that there is an impact. When people don't vote, they're actually making a political statement.
Right.
And I know a lot of people, one of the things about one of our council members that was elected in 2016 said, well, why can't you be a dual citizen? Because there's a lot of people that do not partake in the political system that say, no, we don't recognize this government. This was an independent nation, which is something that when I first came to Maui in the 70s, there were people alive who were here when it was an independent country.
Right.
And I'm proud of the fact that the Green Party is the only party in the state that recognizes and supports a sovereign, independent state, Hawaii, as an independent country, not an independent state. So again,
and
you can see as we're talking all of these.
And that's one of the things that I don't know that anybody has. I've never been able to get anybody to give me a picture of what that would look like.
Well, yeah,
and nobody knows. It doesn't. There's a rightness to it that is undeniable.
Well, when someone does the research and sees how Hawaii became a state, and we can watch, for example, Puerto Rico is going through this same discussion now. Do they want to be a state? Right. Do they want to be a commonwealth? Do they want to be a territory? Do they want to be an independent nation? So these are just things, and what I always push is, and you actually in your opening to the show. Well, I was trying to think of a diplomatic a monologue. Was that it's just that in the marketplace of ideas.
Yes.
Which is what I also pride myself in. I attempt not to respond to issues if I haven't done the research. And I see people just talk off the top of their head. And that's always a challenge for me. I go to different community events, meetings, and you'll hear people will just testify on something or say something that really is off. And the one thing I brought up a little earlier was the Paia bypass. There'll be developments going on, say in Paia or Haiku, and people will talk about the Paia bypass, but it's a state issue that's impacting the county and the community here. The people in Oahu do not go through Paia bumper to bumper or go through Makawao now. As a teacher, excuse me, I used to go through in the morning and the traffic is backed up past St. Joseph's Church and the other direction, and I mean all these places.
It's a 3-minute traffic jam in Makawao. So we're
when
still
you're only going a half-hour drive and you sit 10 minutes. No, it's anyway. I don't want to.
It's a relative.
And then
thing.
we can talk about the West Maui traffic.
Well, the West. That's where I was going. I mean,
good.
Much more important.
I never go to West Maui, so you're going to West Maui.
It can be a two. There was an event that I was involved in at the theater out in Lahaina. A talent show, local talent show, and there were hundreds of ticket holders. It was one of those days when there was a king surge, the high tide, and it was a 3-hour traffic jam to be able to try and get from the Central Valley to out to the west side, and people were calling, on the phone saying, "Hey, I'm turning around. I have tickets for the event tonight, but I can't make it."
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize when I first came to Maui, I lived in Lahaina for a year and a half. So I did live on the west side. And when I first came in the 70s, in the days before hitchhiking was legal, but people still hitchhiked by just standing on the side of the road, you would stand there for 10 minutes and no car would come out of Lahaina.
Right.
So things have changed. And then
Absolutely.
How do we move on and develop? And I'm not anti-development.
No, you can't.
I'm for managed growth,
Absolutely.
not controlled growth.
Right.
How do we put the infrastructure, the roads? They have 2 developments in Haiku, for example, recently that are being developed, and they ruled no traffic impact. And anyone that's been there and looks at Puella Road, it is just a terrible road going right past an elementary school.
Right.
So these are the things that on the state level, which is where I'm involved with now, and the county level, there needs to be a coordination. And something you and I talked about before we went on is land use.
Right.
And the number one issue when I first stood for office in '92 was affordable housing. And in 2018, what is the number one issue?
Still
affordable housing.
Right.
So if we had more control of our land development, for example, over in the Puna district on the Big Island, they're looking at it as like a critical need. We have an emergency. Well, I sort of look at affordable housing on Maui, in particular Maui County in general, as an emergency. So we need to look at taking land and looking at the zoning laws and tiny houses and small houses and
the land
rentals
land development process, because this gets into not only do we have ordinances and there are various different methodologies that are stacked on top of one another, we also have directors that are running departments and making decisions at the county level, and it's
actually at the state level also.
It's at the state level also, and but here in Maui County, I tend to focus on Maui County a little bit because otherwise my head would really explode.
Oh yeah, and it's okay because I happen to live in Maui County also.
And we have a chance, that's where we really have a chance. We did it in 2014. We made a difference as a community. That's where we really have a chance again in 2018, this August 11th, to go and participate in the primary. So many of the state races are determined in the primary because it's everybody's. There is only the Democratic Party. And so candidates going through, jockeying for that one Democratic position, that determination will be made in August. Who wins in November in those races will be determined in August. because everybody's a Democrat, even the Republicans. They're all Democrats. The Democratic Party is polluted with ideas that are not democratic. And you know, that's part of your role as a Green Party candidate.
Yeah, I do want to take issue a little bit. We'll play a little ping pong here, is that I do not agree that everyone's a Democrat. I think that it's the majority party, but a lot of progressive environmentalists feel that they only can be within the Democrat Party because that's who controls things.
Yes.
And you can see the tension that goes on between the progressive wing. Recently in New York, a Democratic socialist won a race against a 10-term incumbent. So here locally, no, if people would look at, now I want to speak about actually the way we elect people.
Yes.
For example, San Francisco just yesterday, or just recently, sorry, elected a new mayor, and they used ranked choice, instant runoff, preferential voting. And you say, you know what, I really like this person, they're closer to my politics, but I really, if they don't get in, I'd rather have this person get in.
It's a rank selection.
So you choose your favorite, second favorite, third favorite, and you can do away with having the primary, and then everyone, you choose your favorite, second favorite. And in something that we should talk about, when people go to the polls in August, you are given a piece of paper,
Yes.
your ballot,
Yes.
and it's got all 5
This is very important.
parties.
This is very important.
All 5 parties are on the ballot. You choose, but you can only choose one party. So you can't vote for the Green for the state rep and then for the Republican in the state Senate.
This
You
is just
can't
for the primaries.
The primary.
It's just for the primaries. Because in the primary election, each of the political parties are running several different candidates. And you need to align yourself with one political party. As Nick said, in the past, you used to get a different form, so it really wasn't a problem. You just told them which party line you were voting in the primary, and they gave you the form that only had the people on it that you were allowed to vote for. That's not the way that it is now. Currently, in August, everybody's going to get one same ballot, and everybody's name is on there. And if you cross party lines, your vote is going to be invalidated. This is really, really important. For the primary election, you must choose one party and vote all the way down that party line. You can't choose a Democrat for one Senate district and a Green Party candidate for a House race. Both of your votes, because you've crossed the party line, both of your votes will be invalidated. Nobody's talking about this, and it is super, super, super important.
Yeah, this is one thing that we have, again, in the federal system, that the way we have our elections are different. For example, in some states, you register as a political party. In Hawaii, no one is a registered Democrat. No one is a registered Green. You're a registered voter.
Right.
So we have what's called open primaries.
Right.
And in the past, we were given, like, again, 5 cards, because this year we have 5 parties, plus nonpartisan, so it's really 6. And you chose which one you want to vote for. And like you said, now, so when you choose one, so the way you said it was perfect, exactly. That's in the partisan races.
Yes.
In the nonpartisan
Yes.
races for mayor and council,
It's not an
everyone
issue.
votes for everybody.
Right.
And in November, when you vote for in the general election, then you can vote for a Democrat for
Yes,
for,
then you can mix and match
right,
in the
exactly.
general election.
You
but
can
in
vote
the
for
primaries,
Green here. You can vote for. And
the other,
that's,
we're gonna wrap it up. The
Okay,
other,
good.
the
we
other,
could go on for hours. I know
it does go on for hours. The other important thing to remember in voting when you do go to the polls is that in the county council race, you are able to vote for 9 individual council members. A lot of people just go in and they vote for the council member for the district that they live in. No, you do get to vote for all 9. So maximize the energy, maximize your effectiveness for taking the time to go to the polls or to go through the mail-in process, which you can still do. Make it easy for yourself. Get your ballots by mail. Go to mauicounty.gov, I think it is, and you'll be able to find what you need. look for a mail-in vote.
And this is really important what you just said too, because this is the first year that actually if you space out, oh no, it's the end of July, beginning of August, I forgot to register to vote. This is the first year that you can actually go and have same-day registration.
Same-day registration.
You go and you register. So we actually have a pretty easy way of voting. You can do it by mail, you can do it absentee. To do it absentee, you don't have to say that you're going to be off island. You can just say, I want to vote at my home. So you have the freedom to vote as you choose. You look at it, you talk to your spouse, or you talk to the people living in your house.
We've never had more of an opportunity
exactly.
to make change.
So there's some things that are really great about Hawaii. We have to really thumbs up. There's certain things that are very progressive in the way we vote is a progressive, in the way as far as an open primary, but we're not progressive when it comes to where we don't have, for example, ranked choice preferential voting. So there's a lot of things that are positive, and what we want to press as someone where I sit is progressive change, progressive change, progressive change, to open up the voting to more and more people. And we can see nationwide how many communities, how many states are cutting the people that are allowed to vote, and the opportunity to go and vote, and the number of polling places that are opened, and all of these things. Now, we have voting on Saturday. We're the only state in the United States that votes on Saturday in the primary. Only one. And then Election Day is a state holiday. That's not true. It's not a federal holiday.
Right.
People have pushed to have a federal holiday. Then why do we have to vote on the first Tuesday to first Monday in November? It's in the federal Constitution. Well, why don't we have two-day voting, all Saturday and all Sunday, like they have in some countries? So there's all these progressive things that are not talked about.
Right, and that's why I appreciate you and your willingness to talk about these things, and your willingness to put your ballot in and run for office. Nikhilananda, running for State House representing District 13 and running as a Green Party. Nick, thank you for everything that you've done for the community, all of your research. You're a wonderful resource, and I really appreciate your level of research and knowledge on these issues. Thank you for bringing so many of them up to our table today. Join us again on Maui Causes. Join us mauicauses.org, and we'll be back again here on a Kaku. Aloha.
Aloha.
This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org.